Hey guys, in this video I'll tell you more about my current setup, software and hardware wise, and show you what my usual workspace in Clip Studio Paint looks like to reflect the tools that I use most often and have readily available. Right off the bat, it's worth mentioning that I'm using Clip Studio Paint Pro, not the X version, and I've never actually tried the latter. Hardware-wise, I mostly use a MacBook Pro laptop, a connected desktop screen, and the Wacom Cintiq Pro 13 tablet, which has its own 13-inch display. So that's 3 screens in total that I normally work with. While I don't think having a display tablet is essential, or even objectively better than using a Surface-only tablet, I would still recommend having at least 2 monitors, or a big one that allows you to have multiple windows up at the same time. It's very useful, in particular if you ever need to pull up references to work with. Now, what you see in the video is the Clip Studio Paint Pro interface on my tablet. In particular, this is my custom workspace. In CSP and other softwares like Photoshop, tools and settings are split into boxes that you can arrange on your screen to have them accessible according to your preferences. Clip Studio Paint allows you to save these arrangements as workspaces by going to the Window Workspace menu on the navigation bar and clicking Register Workspace. As you can see, I already have a couple of them saved, but I usually just stick to this one. Similarly, lower in the Window menu, you can see some default workspaces that you can load if you don't want to create your own from scratch. In case you accidentally move things around, you can always go Window Workspace and click Reload Workspace, which will make things snap back into place. My workspace has the tools that I use most often on display, but you can have pretty much anything visible and snapped to your screen. For the basic list of toolboxes and assets, you can have a look at the View menu on the navigation bar. As you can see, the first thing I have here on the top left corner is the material box. To me, CSP materials are mostly things that I download from the Clip Studio Assets store, as well as some default assets. As you can see here, this box shows me all the 3D assets that I've used and edited, brushes, textures, backgrounds, and a myriad of things that I've downloaded over time from the Assets store. Apart from the 3D assets, I don't really use the vast majority of these on a regular basis, but it's nice to have them at hand. Whenever I need something from this box, I'll just drag it onto the canvas or the brush folder if it's a brush material. Below that, there's the tool property box. The reason I want to have this property box up is because whatever tool I'm using, I tend to want to tweak it at times. This is especially true for brushes. I don't tweak them that often, but it's nice to have it readily available regardless. This box also gives me access to the extended tool settings box, which I won't discuss in this video, but it's essentially just a list of advanced settings that you can tweak no matter what tool you're using or object you've got selected. Right in the middle of the screen sits my canvas. As you can see, the canvas takes up only half the screen, if that much, and that's mostly because I don't like working on big spaces. It's definitely a personal preference, but I like to have a very small space to work with so that I can use short, fast strokes without getting lost in whatever I'm doing. Whether this is your thing or not, it's entirely up to you, and I do know that a lot of people prefer to actually have their canvas stretched big and clear. Next to the canvas is the navigator. This is extremely useful and I keep it well within my right hand's reach since I'm right-handed. As the name implies, the navigator shows you a zoomed out version of your canvas, and if you drag your mouse over it, it relocates you to on the actual drawing, no matter what level you're zoomed in at. It's a particularly relevant tool if you're working on canvases that stretch vertically or horizontally, such as a webtoon page, or if your drawing has a lot of details and you need to zoom in a lot without losing track of the overall composition of your piece. Right next to the navigator, there's a toolbox. This is a very common thing in drawing software and pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go into detail on what it's doing in my workspace. It's just here to help me switch tools easily, really. Below it is the size box. Now, the tool property box, as I mentioned earlier, has the size slider that you can use for most tools that require it. But in particular for brushes, I just find it easier to click directly on the size that you want from this pre-made list. Moving to the right, we find the famous layer box, also very common in digital drawing software. If you're at all familiar with digital drawing, which is an assumption that I'm making for most people in this course, Clip Studio layers are pretty straightforward and not unlike what you'd find in most other programs. If you don't have a basic understanding of how the layer system works, I do suggest that you take some time to find a quick explanation of it, since I won't be elaborating too much on that idea. I will, however, quickly run you through what these buttons in this layer box do, the ones that I use at least. This little thing here gives your layer color. I don't use it that much, only when I'm passing files around to assistants or other artists and I need color coding for certain parts of the drawing. Right next to that is the blending mode drop-down list, which lists the blending modes available for a layer or a layer group. I'll talk more about these later in this chapter. Then you've got the opacity slider and these buttons here, of which I mostly use this one, that clips a layer to the layer below. Again, if you're not familiar with what a clipping layer is, I do suggest you quickly look it up to get a gist of the idea. The next button locks a layer entirely, and while it's active, CSP won't allow you to change a layer anymore. It's extremely useful if you've got layers that you just don't want to change by accident. The one next to it locks the layer's opacity only. Locking opacity, or alpha lock, is also a concept present across most drawing softwares. It basically stops you from being able to add paint outside the lines that you've already painted. The next one is a mode that I actually use a lot. It basically gives your entire layer a single hue, like an overlay, and it's very useful when you're drawing lines with a sketch layer underneath and need the sketch to be in a different, more subtle color so that it doesn't distract from the line art itself. Below that, you've got a button to add an extra layer and one to add an extra vectorial layer. Now this is an interesting thing about CSP that I haven't actually seen done as well on software like Adobe Photoshop. In practice, when you draw line art, there's very little difference between working on a raster layer and a vectorial layer, no matter what brushes you use. Now if you don't know what the difference is between vector and raster layers, a vector layer is essentially a layer where information is stored in vectors, meaning that you can resize its content at will with no loss of resolution. Raster layers are flattened layers, the type that will lose resolution if you resize it, but generally looks more organic. I'll personally only be using raster layers since my lines are intentionally sketchy, but vectorial layers might be your go-to if you're going for a cleaner look. Next up, the button to add a new layer folder, which is self-explanatory, followed by buttons to merge a layer with a layer below and merge the layer's contents with a layer below. The difference between these is basically that in the first case, you only get one layer as the result, whereas in the second case you just flush the contents of a layer to the layer below, but still keep the original layer there, only emptied. Now this one button creates a clipping mask. Again, this is something you can look up if you're not familiar with, but essentially what a clipping mask does, it allows you to hide or show a certain part of your layer without actually changing what's in the layer, so it kind of just applies a mask over it. I personally don't use it that much and won't be using it much in this course, if at all. The trash bin button is fairly obvious, I'd say. As a little side note, when you press the right mouse button over layers or anything in this interface, a bunch of other options will pop up. I won't go into detail on these now, but going forward I'll be sure to explain whatever I do when I use this particular menu. Below this is the automatic action box. Automatic actions are something that I've also only seen on CSP, though that might have been just lack of better research on other programs. It's a very simple concept in itself, and I'll talk about it and how I use it later this chapter. For now, I'll just say it's very useful for me to keep a list of my automatic actions visible and easy to reach. The color wheel is, well, the color wheel. Not much I can elaborate on this regard. On the last column, top right, I've got the layer property box. The main reason for that is that sometimes I use layer outlines, which get applied not to the contents of the layer, but to the layer itself. I will mention this briefly later on and show you how I've used it in the coloring part of this course. Below it, there's a subtool box. Now, whenever you use a tool, you have different subtypes to choose from. For instance, in terms of brushes, you can choose different types of brushes in different tabs or categories, and this box will put them on display. This is the case for most tools in Clip Studio Paint. Lastly, the color set box at the bottom right. It's basically just color swatches. Since I have a lot of characters that I draw repeatedly with consistent palettes, saving them as color swatches is extremely useful. I can create new swatches or delete old ones by going into this menu and editing them, and I can add or remove colors from a swatch, like this. Clip Studio Paint has some default swatches, but I've barely touched those. Another thing palettes can be useful for is storing lighting or environment colors that you use often to keep your coloring as consistent as possible, and we'll talk about that later on as well. So that's it for my workspace. I'm sorry if this was a bit extensive, I just wanted to give you an overview so that you're not confused when I start using these tools, and so that you can use it as a way to explore CSP toolboxes and workspaces on your own too. As with most of these things, there's no right or wrong way to do it, and no workspace will be ideal for everyone. If you're just getting started with Clip Studio Paint, I suggest you think about what things might be useful for you to have at hand to begin with, and then play around with discovering what each tool does for yourself. Don't be afraid to break things, you'll get more used to this as we go along. Today we saw what a Clip Studio Paint Pro workspace can look like and what the essential elements I use in my work are. Next video, I'll zoom in on brushes and how I use them and tweak them to best fit my work. See you then!